Hello, beloved,
Welcome to the Sacred Sister podcast,
where we normalize the magic and sacralize the mundane.
In this podcast, we open up dialogue on metaphysical subjects, self-healing tools, expanding consciousness, and deepening awareness.
We're here to support you in co-creating a life full of healing, meaning, and magic. And the lineup of the season is fire, so make sure to subscribe if you're not already.
I'm your host, Britt, certified self-inquiry and alignment-based smart flow yoga instructor, self-healing song channel, and personal transformation coach, guiding women to gain radical self-awareness in order to reconnect with their most expressive and vibrant self.
And I'm your host, Hannah, a certified astrologer, ordained priestess, and rebirth coach. And I help women integrate past life and ancestral traumas to give birth to their higher self and manifest their wildest dreams into reality.
We're really grateful that you're here.
And together,
we're here to serve as your
Sacred Sister.
Let's dive in. Hello, sacred beings, and welcome to another episode of Sacred Sister Podcast. So, if you've clicked on this, you already know what the title is. The ego is your guru. We're so excited to finally be sitting down and opening dialogue on this incredibly deep relationship that each and every one of us has with our ego expression, with the limitations that the ego can present to us. That's basically a little synopsis on what we're getting into today. And we have the perfect guest that we are opening dialogue on this topic with. Today we're sitting down with Abke, who is a spiritual teacher. Aaron tells us later in the interview how at 24 he left Christianity and felt called to create videos for questioning Christians, which naturally evolved into dialoguing on mindfulness and expanding consciousness. And now he's a very recognized spiritual teacher. Aaron is incredibly eloquent, and I know that you're going to pick that up in this episode. It's so clear to witness the amount of fire and passion that he has for this topic. And while preparing for the release of this episode, I was intaking some other content that he has out there. He's amassed over 160,000 subscriptions on YouTube across some nearly 300 videos. And in a recent interview that he had, the opening question was, do I need a partner to reach enlightenment? And I loved what he said so much. I quoted it, I wrote it down, and I want to share it with all of you. He says, of course not. It's a helpful catalyst for sure. Enlightenment is a path that everyone has to walk on their own. Life is always reflecting to you what you need to see. And every moment the guru is speaking through your life circumstance. If you're paying attention, pay really close attention. You don't need to go find a guru in India or Tibet. Life is the supreme guru. It will definitely use a partner to help you out in that pursuit for inner freedom. I love everything that he said inside of that so much. It's been a direct reflection in my own experience. The amount of energy that we're willing to put into paying close attention to what is circulating within the self can be a really, really great indication of what wants to surface, what wants to be seen, what programs we're carrying around that were inflicted based on past lived experiences or within our lineage or what we were taught from our families. And as a conscious human, it is our birthright to gain clarity on all of those aspects of the self. This is what we mean when we say there is an entire universe within the self. And whenever we gain clarity over what that universe within looks like, we are then able to really zoom in as micro as we want to, and we're able to literally pluck out little pieces that we realize feel burdenous. We're able to reconstruct what our inner minutia looks like in a way that feels more aligned with how we desire to experience this human life. It is such a gift, such a blessing. And yeah, I'm excited to get into the episode. In this episode, we touch on those ego limitations, how ego can create separateness of the self, also separateness from one another, from varied opinions and beliefs, from God, from source, from spirit, from oneness, etc. This entire episode is filled with wisdom surrounding ego expression, ego dynamics, how sneaky the ego can be when fortified with things like conviction and righteousness. It was a joy. I really love this topic. And Hannah and I actually had an entirely different conversation over on Patreon. While in this episode that you're about to listen to right now, we go into a lot of the limitations that the ego expression can present to us. In the conversation on Patreon, Hannah and I go into the really, really expansive and beautiful aspects of ego expression and how literally grounding into our unique ego expression helps us to walk the path that we incarnated into these bodies to pursue. It is a delightful conversation, and if this topic really interests you, I invite you to go over there and check out the Patreon episode as well, which is available on the same day as the episode drops, which means today, my love. So let's go into the human design aspect of my little intro. For this season, I really love highlighting the profile and the incarnation cross for each of our guests' human design. And Aaron is actually a projector. My husband's a projector too. And these projector energies are such fierce leaders. They are such natural guides. They are guides in a way that is not necessarily standing and saying like, I'm a guide, I'm a leader, follow me. It's more so their own direct passion and like the involvement that they like having within their own lives, the things that really get them going, the way that they like truly, truly dive into the things that captivate them. They intake so much information about these things, and then they just are leaders from that space. They are guides because they are so enveloped in what they're passionate about. So moving on to Aaron's incarnation cross, which remember is the cross that we're here to bear and learn from and experience deeply within this incarnation. I love referencing the definitive book of human design, the science of differentiation, or I'm going onto various human design websites and pulling pieces from all sorts of places to compile into this intro. The right angle cross of tension carries the energy of tension that's necessary to maintain order in a tribal environment. This may play out in the family, the work, or the community of the individual, but the tension is a necessary provocation to keep the group aligned and in order. The tension also helps to provoke response, which provides opportunity for more effective leadership. And what I gather from this is a very direct way of connecting with, communicating about, and leading others from this space that's basically like a little tap. It's a tap that says, have you awakened? Have you awakened to the greatness of who you are? Have you awakened to the you beyond you? Have you awakened to all that is and that all is encapsulated within yourself? Aaron seems like this really open-hearted spirit who's just really in love with talking about this topic. And for anyone who looks to connect with Aaron more after this episode is done, he is not doing, as I understand, one-on-one sessions at the time, but he is doing this morning devotional of A Course in Miracles. It's called Living the Course, led by himself and Mark Anthony Lord, and they lead your way into daily forgiveness, surrender, and transformation of the spirit, which is what The Course in Miracles is all about. So if you're interested, you can go over to his website, aaronabke.com, and more information is available there on living the course. I thought that was so cool. Hannah and I at Sacred Sister Podcast are so grateful that Aaron is showing up to do exactly the work that he's doing in the world, and that his unique ego expression is releasing this information in a way that only he can. This is the benefit, this is the gift of ego, when we're able to really temper it and balance it. Without much more, let's hop over to Hannah's astrology segment. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy. See you next time.
Hello, sacred being. This is your host, Hannah, and we are here in the Inner Blueprint section for Aaron Abke. And the reason why I love doing these Inner Blueprint readings is because we look into the chart, in this case the Western astrology chart of Aaron, and we get to know his inner blueprint, his inner archetypes on a deeper level, and see how do they express themselves in his life, how does he use them and work with them. And you will also probably be able to notice those different archetypes within the interview as well. So it makes astrology more practical and more accessible too. So here we go. This is going to be quick. A normal inner blueprint reading with me takes an hour. So we're not going to be diving too deep into his chart. We're just really keeping it simple here. Aaron's sun is in Aries, conjunct Venus, conjunct Mercury in the 10th house. So Aries is the warrior energy. Aries is a trailblazer, a pioneer. Aries is not afraid to lead and to provoke and to bring about new ideas and inspiration in order to create change. His sun being in the 10th house shows that Aaron is natural in standing in the public and being a leader in that way. The 10th house is the house of the public image, of career, of responsibility and direction. So he's able to be very focused, disciplined. I know he's going to be talking about his daily routine that he has been really dedicated to and committed to. And with such 3 planets in the house of Capricorn, that is one of the ways that Capricorn expresses itself, through that structure and the diligence to stay committed to a system that is working and that is productive and that helps him be his highest self. So with his Venus and Mercury being conjunct his sun, he has a natural talent to be a communicator, to be a messenger, and also the Venus comes in as an artist. On his Instagram, he creates illustrations so that his messages are easier understood in that way, and I think that is a beautiful way to express that Sun conjunct Venus, conjunct Mercury. And also Venus is the lover, the relationship partner, the supporter, and he has this ability to bring people together and to help them become the best version of themselves. Now, his moon is in Capricorn in the 7th house. So again, we have that Capricorn placement. His moon is also conjunct Saturn and conjunct Neptune. Neptune is the planet of spirituality. And so we got Saturn being that planet of discipline and structure. And it is that structured religion when Saturn and Neptune are coming together. And with his moon being there, showing that he comes from a family that he was raised in a structured religion. He became a pastor. He was following that religion for a while until actually around his Saturn return, he had this huge spiritual awakening. And it's interesting because that was also when his Neptune, which is the planet of spirituality, was activated. And so that's when he made this huge career change and realized he is now moving towards his North Node more, which is about creating his own truth, not following the path of the past. His rising sign is in Cancer, And Cancer is ruled by the moon. And as a Cancer rising, he is able to hold space for others and nurtures others, and especially in regards to the mind, since his moon is in the 7th house of Libra, which is about sparking new ideas and sparking interesting conversations. And he is able to nourish people with information, with new disciplines, with new structures, with new thought patterns, so that they can find more peace and harmony in their lives, just as he did. And so his North Node is in Pisces in the 9th house, and North Node is the soul's purpose. This is what we are moving towards as souls. Usually it is, or it's always, North Node is always on the opposite side of our South Node. The South Node is where we came from, kind of the luggage that we take on with us as a soul from past lives and ancestry. And in that luggage there are our gifts, but also our traumas and fears. So the South Node is usually what we are meant to integrate. The North Node is what we're meant to manifest. And for Aaron, the South Node is in Virgo in the 3rd house. And for him, he is meant to integrate this black or white thinking, this hell or heaven, this old way of duality. And he is called in this lifetime to move towards creating his own truth and moving towards Pisces. And Pisces is that energy of oneness and unconditional love, realizing that we all one, and ultimately it is that unity consciousness of who we are and the transcendence of the ego that will help us to create that peace and harmony in our lives. And we're talking about this in this episode, as ego is the guru. And it's interesting too because he has very strong Capricorn energy in his chart, and Capricorn is the devil in tarot, and the devil often stands for the ego. So it is for our 3D consciousness energy and archetype that wants to create and manifest in this third reality, in this 3D reality that we're living in. And the ego is not anything bad in that sense, because it just shows us, okay, this is our third dimensional consciousness, and this is what I want to build in this lifetime. And that's really what Capricorn is about. And the tarot, portraying it as the devil is a little bit extreme. It is the negative. It's just the shadow part of Capricorn. So anyone who's listening to this and who has Capricorn placements does not mean that you're the devil or that anything is bad about you. I just want to say this too. Tarot has its own way of how they associate astrology with their cards, and some zodiac signs are just really portrayed in a negative way, and Capricorn is one of them, but does not mean that it is actually the devil or anything bad about it. It's just about if it goes into an extreme and we forget that we are actually unity consciousness and that we're actually one, then the ego can get us into troubles. And so this is what we are talking about in this episode with Aaron. I'm super excited for you to be here. And so if this sounds like something that you're interested in for yourself, you are welcome to go into my website, hannahchristensen.com, and book your own inner blueprint reading. And you can use the code SACREDSIS for a special discount as our Sacred Sister podcast listener. And so we are ready to dive into this interview now. And I just want to mention real quick our Instagram. If you are not following us there yet, this is the time to do so. At Sacred Sister Podcast, we're happy to share with you on a regular basis audio grabs, video grabs, cool art, quotes from our guests, and just really helping you normalize the magic and sacralize the mundane of your everyday life. So find us there at Sacred Sister Podcast. And now, without further ado, let's dive into the episode. Enjoy.
Oh, sacred sister, a
a kindred flame, may we light one another. From the ashes rise, oh, we rise, oh, again.
So wherever you are, I invite you to close your eyes with me for a few moments and just turn inwards towards the present moment, which offers us perfect freedom. You can continue breathing through the nose, keeping the mouth closed, and just allowing the breath to take you deeper into stillness with every inhale and every exhale. Breathing in presence, breathing out stress and anxiety. And as you continue to breathe, I invite you to contemplate the question, who is aware? Who is aware of the breath? Who is aware of the sound of my voice? And is that one itself breathing? Is that awareness of the breath, of sound, making any effort to be aware? Only that which is effortless is natural. Whatever requires effort is not fundamentally original to you. So true meditation is simply tuning in to that quality of being that is natural and effortless. And that natural, effortless being is announcing itself as the feeling I am. The I that knows awareness. The I that is always the subject. The highest form of meditation is to catch hold of this I am knowledge and focus all of your attention and interest on it. For this I am knowledge reveals all other knowledge. To know thyself is to know the whole universe. Because everything contains the same essence of I amness. Everything that lives and exists is knowing itself as I am. And so meditating on this knowledge connects you with everything. And if you fall in love with this simplicity of being, it will reveal the secrets of your true nature. That I am the miracle of awakeness. I am the mind of God looking at itself. I am universal love. I am oneness. I am everywhere. And so we just give gratitude for the gift of being. To be here, now, to be who you are, is a miracle in and of itself. And so we seal this meditation with a deep inhale, feeling gratitude and thankfulness. And as we exhale, bringing our attention back to the breath, the inflow and the outflow, bringing our awareness back to the room. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes.
My goodness.
We're primed.
We're
Thank you.
primed. Yes, we're so
Mhm.
primed. Wow, welcome. Welcome to Sacred Sister Podcast, Erin Abke. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Wow, that was so beautiful. And I want to share this little piece of what really got this meditation going for me at the very beginning whenever you asked, who is it? Who is aware? Such a simple question. Who is aware? And in my mind started thinking of all these external, like who is aware? What is awareness anyways? And then this other whisper came in from behind all these little points and it just said, I am. And then that I am expanded into all these little facets of awareness that are happening in every moment inside of myself. And it completely shifted the entire thing for me. So that was such a beautiful guided meditation. Thank you so much. I feel like I was just grinning ear to ear that entire time.
Sounds like you got it.
I got it.
That's awesome.
It all makes sense now.
I think it's so beautiful too, because when you ask that question, who is aware? What for me came up was like my multidimensional selves. And I was like, okay, who do I choose to? Who do I choose to tune into right now? And it was like this really cool thing because we can choose into different dimensions, into different higher selves of ours, and we can be aware of different dimensions and different timelines, and we can
hear different voices and see different things depending on whatever we're tuned into. But when we tune into this 3D reality, that's when I can hear your voice, and that's when I can really feel that energy. And I love that we're talking about this 3D consciousness today. In this episode, the ego is your guru. And so this is just so exciting because it is such a provocative title, I feel like. And we at Sacred Sister Podcast, we love provocative things.
Yes.
We love to expand the mind, the consciousness, and deepen the awareness, and really talk about topics that maybe are quite opposite of what we usually are being taught, especially in the spiritual realm. So to share a little bit about that for with us listeners, that what is your story? How did you become this spiritual teacher that you are now talking about ego as being the guru?
Well, it really just sort of happened as a consequence of my own desire to be healed and whole and stop suffering. And I feel like that's a great place to teach from, just embodiment of teaching from your own experience. And that's just kind of what happened as I continued to, I guess if I'm backing up, I was going through a period of time after 23 years old. I grew up a Christian, pastor's kid, became a pastor myself at 23, had a huge crisis of faith after taking my first church job, where I was confronted with a archetype of God that did not resonate with me. And the universe put me in a position of sort of up against a corner saying, okay, you can no longer run from these questions like you've been running from them your whole life. Because I was afforded the luxury of being in a church, my parents' church, that was very, very all about the right stuff. The love of God, the goodness of God, forgiveness, compassion, all are included. My dad never preached about hell and stuff like that, the rapture. So I didn't have to really wrestle with those doctrines, but my church that I worked at was very fundamentalist, always talking about who's in, who's out, very egoic in their constructs. And it just turned me off so much. And so I went, I don't believe in this version of God. So I kind of rejected the Christian model of God altogether and went on my own seeking journey. And I think that was the initial catalyst to my many years of severe depression, because as you might know, leaving a religion is just like leaving a cult. Maybe harder, because a cult, typically people aren't in cults for 20 years or something, right? They're in the cults for 1 year, 4 years, and then they leave. So it's like your entire reference frame of reality is either destroyed or turned upside down. And it really causes the mind, it sort of pokes the hornet's nest, right? So I went into a long period of depression, and that's what caused me to really seek for answers of why am I suffering so much? Why does life seem so horrible? Surely if I once believed in a God that's so loving, how could I now be in this reality that seems so opposite of that? And just started seeking for answers and finding a lot of the Eastern traditions resonated a lot, especially Advaita Vedanta Hinduism, Buddhism, a little bit of Taoism and things. And at 27, sort of had a really powerful cosmic consciousness experience where I spent about 2 weeks in a sort of samadhi state where I just had this almost blinding recognition that I was the whole universe experiencing a person. And so it was just impossible to feel anything but joy and love for everyone. And it was an incredible state of consciousness. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is the enlightenment thing that everyone talks about. It is a real state of consciousness. Wow, this is amazing. And it was the day of 2 weeks exactly. I woke up and looked at my phone and noticed it had been 2 weeks where I'd been in that state unbroken. And the first that I can think of, sort of egoic thought came in and said, wow, I wonder if I am permanently enlightened now. I wonder if this was my permanent state. And I didn't catch it, that it was from ego. It was claiming enlightenment, right? And so that's kind of my first, that was what opened my eyes to what ego really is, versus what gets tossed around a lot. I was very frustrated in seeking for answers for a long time, because most teachings I heard on the ego just seemed to create almost more confusion and more feeling of futility. Like, well, if that's my ego, then what's the point of even trying to transcend that? Like, if your personality is your ego,
Yeah.
do I want to be a frontal lobotomy patient or something? Like, what am I going for? I mean,
Totally.
the Buddha said you suffer because you desire. And, ego is the cause of all personal desires. So we say ego is that which makes you suffer. Without ego, you couldn't suffer. So I'm like, well, what is ego then? Like, that's really the question. And that experience showed me that ego is really nothing more than the mental activity, which is always going on, of identifying with things, claiming them as mine, my action, my thought, my feeling. And the more things we claim, the more things ego claims, rather, the bigger it grows, and its sense of self feels more and more real and justified and validated. So that's why it's on an endless mission to sort of question it, identify with everything, because it doesn't care what it identifies with, even if it's something negative or painful. I mean, that will beef up its sense of self just as much. And it's just sort of a program, right? It's like a computation happening. It's not a real entity that can be like, oh, I'm making this poor person suffer with all this identifying. I should really stop it. It's not an entity, which is why a lot of spiritual teachings will say ego doesn't exist, because it's not a person or a thing we can accuse, right? It's sort of like the heartbeat. Like, you can't say that the heartbeat is an entity. There's nobody doing it. It's just happening as a consequence of electrical impulses in the body. So that experience taught me that, and little insights and glimpses into my mind I started to understand things a bit more, and really started to find some freedom and healing. And so I initially got on YouTube to make videos about, I wanted to help people who were questioning their religion, Christianity, find a healthy landing place. Because what I saw was that all the friends I knew, people I came across on the internet, were very cynical and angry and hateful towards religion, and tended to like throw out all the good stuff with the bad stuff. And it was kind of, a bummer for me to see that, because I had found some really satisfying answers of like, look, we don't have to hate the Bible just to believe it wasn't written by God with a feather pen or something. Like, there's lots of value in this book. There's lots of beautiful teachings and texts here that we can gain from. And we can know that it was written by people. That's okay. And same with hell and with the rapture. So I started making videos to help questioning Christians initially. And then that just sort of melted into making videos about mindfulness and self-awareness. And I never did it with any desire or expectation of like being a YouTuber or being a famous teacher. This was my life. It's all I cared about. And I think that's what the universe honors, is when you're following your passion, what lights you up, it's going to pave a way for you.
Mm-hmm.
So beautiful. You know what? I keep feeling like I am hearing a question that wants to be asked from the audience, and that is, what induced that samadhi state initially?
So at the time that happened, I used to work at Google in Mountain View. I was a personal trainer at Google. So it was a great job. I loved it. I loved working there. But I was really depressed at the time. So every day on my break, I was going up to this balcony area just above my gym, and I would eat my lunch and listen to Eckhart Tolle. And it was like the only part of my day where I could have peace of mind. And, Eckhart, his calmness would relax me and stuff. So I was doing that for 2 or 3 months. And there was just one particular day, like any other day, where he was I was listening to a lecture where he was sort of mocking things that the ego says to us. And then he would laugh, and then the audience would laugh, and I was laughing. And he said like 4 or 5 things in a row. If everyone would just be nicer to me, then I could truly be happy. And then, and he would do his Eckhart laugh. And so I was laughing. And 4th or 5th time he said one of those lines, I sort of laughed myself into an epiphany, because I kept relating to everything. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what my ego says. And I was like, it's just a program. I just saw it. It's just a program. It's not me. I'm not actually thinking those thoughts, which means I'm also not actually suffering from them. The mind is endowing those ideas with significance and belief. And so because of that, the emotional body has to respond with a negative emotion because it's an incorrect perception of reality. And, I listened to Abraham Hicks a bit and understood the emotional guidance system a bit. So Source just kind of connected all the dots in that moment. And it was like a nuclear bomb of awareness went off that just like silenced my ego. I give a lot of analogies for that experience because it's totally like impossible to really describe it. But it was sort of like let's say I was giving somebody a tour of my mind. And like, behind this door is my sense of humor. Say hi, Aaron, sense of humor. Okay, cool. Behind this door is my, intuitive faculties. Say hi to Aaron's intuition. Okay, cool. And then this door is where Aaron himself is. So here I am. And I opened the door and I just saw like a bunch of machinery like running by itself. And I was like, wait a minute, where's me? I'm supposed to be in there. I thought that was where I was. Nobody's there. And then it was just silence, peace, joy. There was nothing more to think about, right? There was just, now I'm finally joined with reality and I can get over all of this insanity that's been totally blinding me from the absolute perfection of everything. So it's like, how can you think about anything when all you see is perfection all the time? It was kind of like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, beautiful. I feel like there's so much that I want to touch on, and I'm feeling into, okay, which one this wants to come through. First of all, thank you for sharing all of that. And that's really a beautiful story. I love how you come from that Christian background. Both Britt and I are coming from that as well.
Okay.
And, and also finding our own way of like, okay, how can we find that middle ground? We don't have to resonate a lot with that. We don't have to throw it all out, all the teachings, because Jesus is like an amazing spiritual teacher and there's so much to learn. And with him together with Mary Magdalene, it's like there's a lot of stuff that has been manipulated and has been shifted, but when you go into the deeper truths and really feel in your heart of what that means to you, there's so much wisdom in those stories.
Oh, yes.
In the Bible, in the Gnostic Gospels as well, the things that have been taken out of the original Bible. So love that you touched on that. And now in regards to the ego, I want to share something before we went into the episode, and I really felt into what does the ego mean? What's the definition of ego, right? And ego is just I. It just means I. And it's fascinating because it can be so many things, right? It can be everything. Depending on what I was saying after the meditation or during the meditation, I felt like, okay, I can feel into that like oneness energy of like, I am everything. I am a multidimensional being. I am the universe. I am life. I am that I am. Mm-hmm. Or I can feel into, I am Hannah, right? In this 3D reality at this dimension and this time. And it's so interesting because it was actually Brit that helped me feel deeper into that. Because remember, you had this workshop when you had the High Priestess tea, and you were like asking people to prompt each other, who are you? And then to talk about who you are. And my natural reaction is, I am a multidimensional being. I'm everything, like that was like my natural consciousness where I was tuned into. And Britt was like, I don't want you to talk about that. Just talk about your 3D, your 3D human self. And that I feel like is so beautiful because we've been, I feel like in that spiritual path. So, talking about the ego as something negative and as something that we kind of have to transcend and and there is a way. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful to feel into oneness and to come from that space. But then also there is a beauty in like realizing, okay, who am I as a human person in this 3D reality, right? As that 3D consciousness. And yeah, I would love to hear like your perspective of how do you feel into that part of the ego?
Yeah, it's a very nuanced topic, because again, there's lots of different ideas of ego. So I always stay really concise with my definition so we all can be on the same page. And from my perspective, ego is just the activity of identifying. So, Hana is something that the source is doing, something that the universe is doing. So ego is that conception that I have my own separate independent will that can be even opposed to the universal will. And when that idea goes away, when you realize there can't be a separate will than the one divine will, then everything is equally valid. So you become the universal ego, you might say. In Hindu tradition, the word is Brahman for the universal ego. And so, Aaron is something that the universal ego is doing. But when my sense of self is no longer, I am this separate individual entity that occupies a body, I have to take actions to preserve this body and enhance this body and self and whatever, then everything is seen as my own will. When I become that universal ego, every person, every activity, every event, everything is unfolding exactly as I will it to. So it's impossible to have resistance towards life anymore, because it's just that, like I said, that sort of blistering recognition of perfection. Like if I see a soul, a person who's dishing out suffering to others, I don't see a mistake being made. I see karma and inertia acting itself out according to the divine plan that every single, dream character, so to speak, in the dream has been given the ability to have its own unique journey, to choose between positive and negative polarity. And the extent to which it chooses either polarity will dictate its karma, and it will have to act out that karma. And it's happening perfectly everywhere you look. So I don't see anything wrong anywhere I look. But from the universal ego standpoint, the universe is self-organizing and self-correcting because the whole plan is it wants to know itself. So it doesn't want to get too lost in delusion. Delusion is serving a purpose to be the contrast. Darkness is the contrast to light. But the point is light. The point is understanding my true nature. So in that sense, both are equally valid. But when love sees something out of balance, it seeks to correct that imbalance, but not in a forcible way, but like by offering whatever help is available to that person at the time. So that's why we'll say, people are only able to act out of their current state of consciousness. So you can't change anyone, you can't fix anyone, but you can offer your own energy. You can offer your own embodiment of truth and love. And, energies are always interacting because everything's connected. And so maybe in my atmosphere, I can sort of invite them energetically into a higher state of seeing. And so that's what service becomes. So it's like, I'm no longer obligated to save anyone, to be a hero, because the universe isn't broken, right? To believe it's broken and I need to fix it, that's ego. That's creating a separate will that needs to correct the divine will. And so much of the time, unwittingly in spirituality, we do that. We can sort of slip into that role. If I need to be the savior, the hero for other people, rather than I need to just play my part that source wants me to play. I need to be the bee that looks for the open blossoms. And that's all I'm ever doing. And if the blossom's closed, that's because it's supposed to be closed. And that's perfect, right?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh. I love this conversation so much. You're so eloquent.
Thank you.
You're so
I spend a lot of time thinking about it.
Yeah, good for you. I'm literally just sitting here like beholding your majesty, because it is truly this is such a topic that's near and dear to my heart. And I also have a lot of Gemini placements. And I feel like as I get speaking on something, my mind is going off on all these other little thought streams, and then I want to create context for like each individual thing, and then it turns into a bunch of tangents. And I'm also really feeling into the capability of communicating about this, because so much of it is unseen, so much of it is within our mind space and perception based and perspective based. But I really love the way that you're describing everything. So what I wanted to touch on, and Hannah, thank you so much for sharing that about that workshop, because it's like, I never have an idea of what it is that's impactful in what way until someone is able to relay it to me and communicate it to me. So that little tidbit is very valuable to me. And it is something, like I was saying, that is so near and dear to my heart, because I feel like a lot of times this is a natural sort of inclination that we can get. I know it's an inclination that I got when I had my spiritual awakening, that I wanted to really identify with the oneness. And it felt so like I was losing myself even more. And I really identify with the term identity crisis as well in my earlier years. And I think that it can create a lot of confusion. This is something that I see within my clients as well. And it's a reason that I love tuning into the self-study in the yogic system. It's Svadhyaya, this self-knowledge, this inquiry, this massive reflective approach to navigating the self and coming to know the self more fully. It's like the pillars that my own business is based upon. And the reason for that is because so many times I've done that workshop exercise, and so many times I hear half the room or more identifying with this: I am oneness, I am everything, I am the universe, I am this, I am this. And the most special part of our ego expression that is able to help us really carry out what it is that we're here to do directly comes from what makes us unique. Like, what have I experienced in this human body, in this human family dynamic that I have in my partnerships, the interactions that I've had with my pets. And yeah, that reflective piece is just it's so huge for me. And it answers so many of the questions when I do feel like I'm just floating around in space and I'm like, well, who am I? And what is my purpose? And what am I meant to do? And what am I even interested in? How do I desire to grow? What do I desire to know more of myself? What do I want to develop within myself? What triggers do I have? What programs are interrupting my natural expression? It's like, yeah, I feel like it's a real superpower of mine just to ask a lot of questions. I'm like a little question machine.
Yeah. Well, that's how you grow, is by asking questions.
Yeah.
Each one of us is like an entire universe in and of ourselves. And this is why I love, as you guys are probably familiar with, the Law of One teachings about how the evolution of consciousness kind of happens in these 7 layers or 7 densities or 7 stages maybe, which correlate to our 7 chakras. And so it's like the universe has the 7 densities as its chakras, so to speak, in the same way that we have 7 chakras or energy centers, which contain all the energies that make us who we are individually. And so it's like we're the microcosm of the macrocosm. And it's just so cool and beautiful to see that sort of like divine fractal nature of the universe, that it just goes in on itself forever and outwards on itself. And it's always in this mode of self-discovery. And that's the only purpose there is to anything, is self-discovery, that who am I question. So yeah, the questioning, which is the ultimate one question of who am I, is what drives all spiritual seeking, the desire to know myself. And every desire we have, even through ego, the car, the relationship, the house, even those reflect a desire to experience myself in a new way. There's only one desire in the universe, right? It's the desire to know myself.
And I feel like that is that solar plexus chakra consciousness, that the willpower, that's where the ego comes in, with the willpower and the way that we shine our light. And in astrology, it's actually the sun that represents the ego. And the sun rules Leo, the sign of Leo. which is the star, the queen, the king within us. And also, it's interesting because Leo is in the opposite of Aquarius. And we're moving into this age of Aquarius now, where we are finding this balance between Aquarius and Leo energy. And we're coming out from the age of Pisces, which was like this balance between Pisces and Virgo. And Pisces was all about, transcending the ego and having to really get away from the 3D consciousness self, transcend into higher realms, into oneness. And Virgo helped us to create the routines, the prayers, the rituals on a regular basis, the discernment of what we let in so that we can reach that state. And we are right now at this threshold between the two, which is so fascinating. Yeshua was like the bringer into the age of Pisces, and now we're moving into age of Aquarius. And it's finding like, okay, how can we refine this balance between Aquarius, the universal mind, the universal consciousness, and Leo, which is the personal identity, which is the sun, the ego that makes us special in who we are, and that helps us bring in these, or allow ourselves to receive these ideas from the universal consciousness grid that we have all access to. But how it will be expressed is uniquely depending on us, on our individual free will and the way that we express ourselves and shine our light in this world. And I feel like I think we might differ a little bit in the definition of ego here, because I think it has different layers to it, you know what I mean? But like in astrology, the ego is the sun, which is like the way that we are special, the way that we shine our light,
individual
our willpower,
expression.
exactly, our individuality. And then there's the ego that is the program that just kind of like runs through it, as you were saying, that, identifies with literally every single thing. And then it goes into an extreme where we forget that we're actually universal consciousness, and we're actually just experiencing ourselves as this human being here in this reality. It's one of many lifetimes and timelines, and
Right.
So let's talk a bit about how can we feel into that other aspect, into the goodness of that ego aspect, and seeing it as the guru, as you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, to your point, I think the way that we bridge those two, Aquarius, Pisces, is the understanding that transcendence doesn't mean you lose anything. And that's why there's always this resistance for most people who are maybe like kind of sort of coming into their spiritual awakening, and they hear you need to transcend your ego. And there's obviously still a lot of ego, which doesn't like to hear that. So it's like, oh, no, that can't be possible. You must integrate it and have a healthy ego and stuff like that. And so the analogy I like to show people is, if I am identified as my hand, and I believe I'm the hand, for sure I'm the hand, no doubt about it. And someone's like, Aaron, you have to transcend your hand. I'm like, no, I don't want to lose my hand. Well, but then let's say I do transcend my hand, which is the realization, oh, I'm the whole body. I'm not just the hand. Do I lose the hand? No. Now the hand is put into the right balance with everything else. It finds its rightful place. So I'm not obsessing over it anymore, but when I need to use it, I can use it. And this is what happens when we transcend mind, is that mind just becomes the servant rather than the master. Transcending mind doesn't mean you become brain dead or something. Mind is, in the spiritual sense, the faculty of labeling the world. This is why, Hindu tradition will say there is no world, meaning there's no world outside of you, because you make it up with your projections and your labels. Whenever the mind labels something, it puts a name to it or an idea to it, it only ever relates to the label and never to the thing itself or the reality in the present moment. And so the extent to which we allow the mind to label the world and then think, we take those labels to be facts, the more we suffer. because we're making the dream world more and more real. And the more real the dream becomes to the mind, the busier the mind gets thinking about it and trying to sort it all out. So the more suffering and entropy is created in the mind. So we go backwards in that process by negating the reality of our definitions and denying the reality of the world outside of us and saying, no, there's no world outside of me because I'm not a separate self. The whole world is myself because I am the one being just experiencing this body right now. And it's dreaming of all these other characters too. There's just one being. And if we all agree with that and clap to that and say yes to that, well, then it might do us good to like really feel into that. What does that mean to say there's only one being? It means that you're me right now, having this experience, having her experience. And the more you feel into that, the more the idea of being a separate self apart from life, who has to struggle with life and things like that, begins to drop away. And as we said before, you become totally accepting of reality the way that it is, because you see it as perfection. So transcending ego is just transcending the belief that, like when I'm dreaming at night and I'm in a dream, whether it's a good or bad dream, doesn't matter. If you've ever had the experience of becoming lucid in a dream, could you possibly say you lose anything when you become lucid? The only thing you can say you lost is delusion, right? You realize, oh, I'm the dreamer of the dream. So now whatever's happening in the dream is of no real consequence to me because I know it's just a temporary experience, right? And we can have that same recognition in the waking state. And that's all enlightenment is. So this person, this configuration of energy called Aaron, people call Aaron, continues to go on as it always did, but without all of those imbalances and distortions of selfishness and pride and the need to overcome others. The ego makes us all less unique, not more unique. The ego makes us all automatons, if that makes sense, because all egos want the same thing, right? Fight to get to the top, be number one, overcome the other, possess the other, control the other. So really, ego makes us less and less unique, and all of those individual expressions of source that all of us are hampered by that and obscured by that. So to be empty of that separate self is to be full of the divine, because you find that more of that divine energy is able to express without those blockages of ego in the way. So transcending ego doesn't mean transcending personality or individual expression. In fact, quite the opposite. You find that all of those things become far more empowered and enlivened with the absence of this belief that I'm struggling against life and trying to, fight to get to the top, and all of these ideas that ego has ingrained in us. It's just a product of sort of Darwinian evolution of, survival of the fittest. Ego is sort of a leftover remnant of that. And so we're at the place in our current evolution of consciousness where that egoic faculty of mind has sort of outlived its usefulness. And human beings are beginning to wake up and move into the fourth chakra, or fourth density of consciousness, which is unity consciousness. And all that is the recognition that, yeah, we're all, experiencing separate bodies and having separate experiences maybe, but we're all one being, one consciousness. And so if we get on board with that, then we realize there's nothing to struggle or fight against. We can all work together and be in this together and celebrate each other's uniqueness. Because if I know that I'm you, then I can look at all of your unique properties and expressions and go, wow, look how amazing I am. Like, look what I can do in that form. I had no idea. So you become an experience of me, and everybody does. And that's a world that I think we're probably at least a few hundred years, maybe 1,000 years away from. But it's really cool to see, especially with the internet and the ability to connect with people like we're doing right now, that this awakening is happening everywhere. And slowly the recognition that I must be something more than this little isolated self that just lives a short, finite lifetime and all those other ideas, that can't possibly be my true reality. And if all of us are feeling that at the same time and awakening out of that, then there must be some truth to it, right?
Yeah. And it's depressing too, if you feel into that, if you really feel into,
Yes.
wow. I mean, me personally, I went through after pretty much I let go of my Christian beliefs, I went into atheism for like around a year.
Mhm.
And really felt into that sort of belief system, and felt into, okay, how would that be if I literally just identify with this body
Yeah.
and in this lifetime? And I got so depressed. It like literally got me into this deep dark hole of depression, and I was like, what's the point? What is the point? I'm just taking away resources. Why am I even here?
Yeah.
There's no deeper meaning to life. And I had suicidal thoughts, and I was like really playing with the thought of like, well, why am I doing this in the first place? Why am I trying to suffer here on this world? Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And I'm not saying that atheism isn't a good thing for some people to move through in this lifetime,
Right.
because that might
Of
be
course.
exactly what they need to experience. But for me personally, in this lifetime, it was like perfect for me to experience for a year. That got me into this dark hole where then my higher self just came through so strongly. And I just had this deep release this morning in meditation, where I was just like so grateful for her to really come through to me and talk to me through my text. Actually, I was in an abusive relationship and a toxic job, and I was like outside just sitting there. It was the day before my solar return, and I took my phone. I just felt called to take my phone and go into my notes, and then my finger just started writing. And it was like my very first channeling experience that I had like that, like channeling the divine and just letting it flow through me. And my finger just like started writing, and it just started, run, get out of the situation, leave this place. And that day, that night, I broke up with my then partner, and the next day on my solar return, I left everything behind and changed my
Nice.
whole life. And that was my big rebirth experience there. And I realized, wow, I have been denying that for so long. When I was a kid, I was astral traveling all the time, and it was normal. And I had this innate feeling and that connection to God. But then, throughout religion and throughout the belief systems and throughout everything, it just kind of like got super confused about it and forgot who I was, who I truly was.
Yeah.
And then identifying with just my ego for like a year got me into a whole dark place, which then got me into like the most beautiful heaven place that I am now, so it's like we have to kind of feel into those different states. And I feel like what we'd call hell is that state of ego where we are disconnected from
Separation.
our higher self, right? Disconnected from the universe, disconnected from oneness, and think that we have to carry everything on our own. We have to carry these crosses of life and feel burdened, and we have to figure it all out, what the next step is. And
Yep.
and it's hard to go for life like that. And I've even found myself, even after that dark night of the soul, I found myself when I started my business in that place for a while, because I was like, oh my gosh, I need to like get my business going, and I need to learn about how to do the stuff, because it was so uncomfortable for me. It was so out of my comfort zone to have my own business. And then until I realized, you know what, I just surrender. I just tune into the divine, let my higher self guide me, and made my higher self as my business partner. And just like, you know what, I'm just going to channel you. And I'm just going to be, like you were saying, the hand, I
Yeah.
just let this divine energy guide me to whatever needs to be spoken, whatever I need to be doing with my hands, with my actions, with my words, and let it express itself through this consciousness, this 3D consciousness as Hannah, and everything shifted.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Like, as soon as we just take the step back and be like, hands off, I surrender. It's not on me.
Yeah.
It's not my thing. It's not my mission. It's not my own goal. It's the divine. It's for the highest good. It's for the experience, for the universe itself, for life. Then we can just let it flow. And then it expresses itself uniquely through our 3D consciousness, which makes it so special to us. But it's based on that surrender state of, I know I am that universal consciousness, and allowing that to flow through this vessel in this lifetime.
Yeah. It's always about getting out of the way. And ego is just that which gets in the way. And once you see that, there's no fear in transcending that, because you know it's not real. It never was real. And true healing and true freedom comes from that recognition. I call it freedom before, not freedom from. Because if freedom from is the way we heal, then we never really can be free. If bondage is actually possible for the source, then source is screwed, right? The source is always free. It's never actually bound. It's only lost in ignorance. And the awakening to reality is the recognition of, oh, that's never been true. Not that it was true and I got free from it. It's that it never was true. And so ego just binds you to those illusions that we project onto the world of, I'm this person, this has happened to me, I've really been traumatized, it now defines me this way. And we get wrapped up in those stories. And the more wrapped up we get, the more disconnected we get from our divine self. So, if you think that ego has anything to do with what makes you unique and individual, then you won't want to transcend it. But in the topic of this conversation, that's why ego is very divine, because it serves as, in a sense, your guru, because it shows you everything you're not, everything that causes you suffering, everything that separates you from your divine essence. And it gives you a really good chance to experience those things and learn about them so that you can eventually go beyond them. And that is the experience of self-realization. If you are the source already, if you are reality, then how can you see yourself if you are yourself, right? You can only see what you're not, if that makes sense, because you are it. So if we try to see what we are, if we look for what we are, then we have to be looking from a false point of view, from an egoic point of view. So self-realization is never the act of finding or discovering myself. It's really just the act of standing convicted in who I am. No, I am that. I don't care what the mind says about it. I don't care what life circumstances seem to indicate. I know I am that. I am the source. And as we stand convicted in that, the illusions begin to drop away, because the reflection of who I am is what I'm not. You can never be away from yourself. Like, if I want to take a look at myself, how can I stand outside of myself and look at myself? I can't do it. So you're always that. You've never been anything else. So thank goodness for the ego in that sense, because it is what source is doing to give itself that mirror to know what it's like by experiencing what it's not. Only by knowing separation can we really know what love is. Only by knowing sadness, depression, anxiety, and stress can we really know what peace is. And that's the beauty.
That is so the beauty. Wow. As you were just going on this last stream, I was having so many flashbacks to younger years and really feeling like the conviction inside of my body of how sure I was of all these terrible things about myself, that I'm not loved, that I'm not enough, that I'm not talented, that I'm not able to have friends. And I love what you just said there about how the only way that we come to know who we are is by having that experience of who we're not, because it really drops us into a state of discernment as far as what our human experience has included and what beliefs we have intaken about ourselves. And I also loved what you said about how it was like some freedom piece.
Freedom before.
But I can't even remember. But just the fact that we're able to drop that frame of belief, that program of everything that we're not, because that's where the freedom is found.
Yeah, because
it's
it's
so
never
hard
been
for me
true
to talk about this.
I think what you're getting at is like we drop it because we realize it never was true. It's not that I
Yeah.
really wasn't enough and then I figured out how to be enough. That's not
Right.
healing, right?
Yes. Yes.
That's making an illusion real.
Yeah, that's the piece, is that the conviction, that's the piece that I'm getting
Yeah.
at, is that that conviction is it's everything that holds us in that bondage state.
Mhm.
Because when we're feeling tied up, when we're feeling these massive deficiencies, like, oh, I want to be that, or oh, how could I ever do that, it feels like the most real thing inside of ourselves.
Right.
It's like, think about it, if everybody was able to adapt and enact this that we're sitting here talking about right now, it's like the whole world would be freed of
Right.
everything that is holding them back from being their most authentic and expressive self. But well, I don't want to say authentic, because even being inside of that suffering is authentically where they're at in that moment.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. This is just such a profound piece of dialogue, and I really, really am so grateful and appreciative that we're having it right now.
Yeah, no, it's everything, I think, to understand these concepts. If you want to be free, if you want to be happy, if you want to realize your potential, this is where the cookie crumbles, right? And so I can give us maybe another way of looking at it that might also be helpful. How do, like you were saying, how do these illusions of what I think I am, I'm not enough, I'm a loser, no one loves me, whatever, how do they feel to be so freaking real if they're just illusions? Like, really sit with that question. If it's not real, why does it feel and seem to be so freaking real? Well, if an illusion isn't real, like if I see a mirage in the desert, okay, there is no lake over the next sand dune, but as long as I think there is, it's as good as if it's there, right? As if it really was a lake over the next sand dune. But once my mind connects that it's not really there and it's just an illusion, then all the consequences of believing it was there drop away. I stop walking towards it. I stop, hoping to find the water there. I realize, no, it's not there. So that tells you that illusions only appear real because they borrow reality. Borrow from what? What reality? You, right? You are the only reality. So without your belief in them, illusions can't have any power. So that's freedom before. It's like we're lending our reality to illusions all the time. And because awareness is so innocent, the mind is just a reflection of what you give attention to, which is why you cannot ever wait for the mind to feel like it's true to believe it. Like if you feel unworthy, well, don't wait for your mind to just change its mind and feel worthy, because that's not how it works. It's going to keep reinforcing like a feedback loop, whatever you've given attention to. And so awareness, which is what the source is ultimately, is trying to know itself. What's my nature like? What are my qualities like? And so it's almost like an innocent child that's just sort of walking through the world and learning about itself. And so when a circumstance happens and, the evolutionary brain kicks in of, oh no, you're in danger. Awareness doesn't know if that's not true. It just sees I'm in danger. And then if it gives attention to that, the mind creates a thought system of that. And then it keeps reflecting it back to awareness. So awareness just goes, oh, and it just believes it until it suffers enough to begin, as Brittany was saying, questioning, is that really true? Is it true? Then it can start deleting that program and realizing, oh, it never was true. So the mind is inertia. It's like a ball rolling down a hill or something. And I had an experience on mushrooms one time that really showed me this, where I had this this experience where, if you've ever done plant medicines, you kind of know how this is. But I was in a really deep part of the trip, and some kind of, I don't know, intuition dawned on me that said, basically, some really sacred experience wants to be revealed to you right now. Would you like to have that experience? And I just sort of felt like the holiness of it, of like, oh, wow, this is like a big deal. And so I went, yeah, I want to have whatever this experience is. And so the next thing intuition said was, okay, well, in order to have this experience, you're going to need to let your eyes roll back in your head and kind of lose body consciousness. And I was like, oh, that's a tough one. Like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't want to look like I'm crazy and having a psychotic episode or something. And it was very loving and said, no problem. We're not forcing you to have this, just letting you know this is how it works. You have to lose body consciousness to have this. Mm-hmm. And so I went, okay, I really want to have this. So, all right, I think I can do that. So it said, okay. So I just let my awareness of my body go, and I felt my eyes roll back in my head, and I just sort of accepted it. Thankfully, nobody else was home with me at the time. And then it said, okay, one more thing is going to happen. It's so loving the way it like guided me through it. It said, your jaw is going to cramp up and kind of like clench like this. And you're going to have to let that happen too. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. That's crazy. I can't go there. I was like, no problem. You don't have to do it. Just letting you know, if you want to do it, this is how it's going to work. I was like, it's so loving and sincere. I've got to trust it. So I did. So I'm having this crazy mushroom trip and lost all body consciousness, and poof, I was like in some other space. It was like almost like a misty, foggy, illuminated light space. And I knew in that moment that essentially in so few words, the creator wanted to reveal itself to me in a certain way of like, this is who I am. I'm going to show you a secret or something. And so in the light mist area, it started to part, and I saw a figure of like a little girl, like 2 years old, like barely able to talk. And what I saw like was such a juxtaposition to what I'd always felt was God. God's this, powerful monarchical boss in the sky who controls the universe, right? And it wasn't that at all. When God revealed itself to me, it showed itself as a child looking at a butterfly, like sort of, it was caught in this moment of wonder, like, and I understood what it was. It was trying to show me that God, what God really is like original innocence before anything ever existed, like God is. And so in that sense, it doesn't even know about itself. And it was so blinding that I had this, probably was an egoic thought, came up and said, oh my gosh, like I've got to go tell it. I've got to go let this being know, like, you are the supreme being, don't you know? And as soon as that thought was created, like something just squashed it and was like, no, don't contaminate it. It's perfect. It's not supposed to know what it is. And it answered every question of the universe in a sense. It's like, this is why the creator's knowing itself, because it doesn't know itself. It's so innocent and pure that it's like a child, like, who am I? And it's this masterfully creative, infinite being of infinite possibilities, of which you and I and everyone is one of those right now. And so I understood that awareness is like that. If the creator's like that, awareness is like that. It learns about itself by experiencing. Like, no duh, that's why we're here experiencing. Like, everything's happening for a reason, right? And so in a sense, and the law of one teaches this, everything is like an experiment the creator's running. And its nature is always that supreme innocence and love and purity. And so it always comes back to that, no matter what it experiences, no matter how far away from its nature it strays, it always has to come back to that realization, I am oneness, I am love, I am innocence. But that's why everything is sacred. Even our suffering is sacred. And the ego, coming back to our topic, is kind of that guru that's showing innocent awareness. This is what you're like. This is what you're like, by allowing it to experience what it's not like. Because we don't like to suffer, right? Something in us goes, no, that's not what I am. I don't want this experience. And that's that innocent child of God, so to speak, within us that has no clue what it is, but it is what it is. So it has to resonate with love, and it has to not resonate with separation and darkness. And so you just find that everything's beautiful and divine when it's seen through that lens.
You don't say.
I'll tell you how I really feel. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Again, I just have to say, I'm just so glad that everything in your life has panned out exactly the way that it has, so that you can be here doing all of this dialoguing, all of this communicating. You do it so succinctly and so concisely too. It doesn't seem like there's a single word that could be edited out. You've been doing this for a long time also.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could take credit for it, but I can't, because, as you go through this journey and understanding, when you know there's no ego, that's also the recognition that there's no doer. Like there's no separate self who's deciding all the words that come out. It's really like, to the extent I get rid of my ignorance of my divine nature, that supreme divine nature can just channel through much more easily. And so you have this feeling of like, I'm kind of observing everything I'm saying no differently than you guys are. It's just happening, right?
Yeah. That's the beauty of just allowing it to flow through us, allowing that life force to flow through us, and feeling into that source.
It's the flow
energy.
state.
Yes. And it's so fun. I'm so excited to look at your chart, because first of all, I hear so much Pisces, very connected to Pisces energy and Virgo. And then I hear so much of the Aries, the I am, right? Literally the Aries affirmation is I am.
Well,
and
in Vedic, I'm a Pisces.
What is it? Oh, in Vedic, yeah.
In Vedic, I'm a Pisces.
And I think it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful because we're, just as you were saying, we're all experiencing source. We are source, and we're letting that flow through us, through our sun, through our consciousness, through our ego, in the sense of our individuality, of our individual way of how we're shining our light in this reality, in this lifetime, as this vessel that you are with Aaron, and you're shining that through that Aries sun, and it's so beautiful how you're doing that. And that's why I always love to do these inner blueprint readings of our guests beforehand, because it helps us also to understand where they coming from, because it's like this whole birth chart, just as you were saying, we're a universe within ourselves, and each one of us has that Aries archetype within us as well, but not necessarily as the sun, not necessarily as the expression of it. And so by expressing yourself through that, it's just, that's how you in particular channel source and let it flow through you, and it comes out like that, shining bright. So
it's like the archetypes are expressing themselves through us rather than the other way around.
Yeah, in a sense. It goes both ways. It goes both ways,
Totally.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's just because that's how we can also see how source and God, divine, can show itself in such different aspects, right? It can show itself as the innocent child, which is like the Cancer archetype. But it can show itself as the Capricorn archetype too, which is the boss, which is the, showing up as like, I command, and, I make these things happen, and I build, I am the architect of life, and that's just another facet of how it shows up, and it's just so beautiful when we see life from that bigger perspective, and then realize, okay, cool. I can connect to that. I can connect to that higher perspective, to the source, to the deeper awareness and the higher consciousness, and then let it flow through me. And in whatever way it needs to come out, it's going to come out, and it's going to be perfect.
Right. Yeah. What's cool about one of the things the Law of One teaches about the archetypes of the zodiac is their term for it is the archetypal mind. So our sun solar system has the 12 zodiac signs. But what Ra says in the Law of One is like, if we could go to another star system like Sirius or something, and we could somehow study their zodiac, they would actually have a different zodiac than we have, because their star system is its own unique experiment. And the cool thing is that Ra says stars that are closer together will share similar information with each other. So like we would recognize a lot of the same archetypes in that star system. Maybe they have 9 instead of 12. Maybe they have 14 instead of 12. Maybe they have only one different archetype than we do. Who knows? But it would be some different experiment of the creator, because the creator's infinite, right? There's no end to how many experiments and possibilities it can know of itself. And so Ra says the farther and farther away you travel in the universe, the more alien things become to you. And at one point they ask Ra, like, have any souls from your memory complex traveled to like another galaxy to see what it's like out there? And Ra says something like, yeah, a few of us have wandered to distant galaxies or other star systems far away. And they say something like, what they reported back to us would baffle the mind and confound the intellect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, it was so out there, like it was nothing like we recognized.
Yeah.
And I just think that's so cool.
Yeah, that's why it's so hard to talk about these spiritual experiences, right? Like I'm guiding my clients to meet their star family, and some of them have like really specific visions, very an incarnated form of like the Lyrans or the Pleiades or this from Sirius. And then others are literally going into places they're like, I don't even know how to describe this.
Yeah.
This is like absolutely amazing. It's like sacred geometry forms and like, but they're beings. And, it's just like this like experience that we can't as a mind it's so hard to put into words because it is so different from our human experience, and we are still filtering it through our human mind, our human ego, so we're still trying to like calculate it with the machine
right,
to try to put it into words and process it, and it can be really hard. And that's why I feel like there's so much confusion in regards to words being created. Like the actual language, when we commune with higher beings, it's not through words,
right,
because the word in itself can trigger so many different things. And people, just as you were saying, we're talking about ego, we can see it as this or as that, it's just like, what do we define? That's why the definition is so important. How do we define such a thing? How do we define God? What do we define ego as? What do we define feminine or masculine as? Because any other person through their human experience sees and feels it in a different way. And that's where so much confusion ends up starting. And I feel like that's where we are with the different belief systems that we have here on Earth, because ultimately it's, you study different religions, like ultimately the core is the same. That's where the Christianity, the core is so deeply innocent. It's so love, it's source. But then the way it's being expressed through the words and through the human minds of the people that are a part of it is so individual to that particular religion or to that particular way. And that creates confusion for other people, because I'm like, that's not how I resonate with that. But even though they are all talking about the same experience.
Right. Yeah, that's part of the insanity of our world today, is like everyone's just sort of fighting over labels. And you're a this, you're that. And, when you label someone, you never see the person ever again. You just see the label. But, like conservatives might call liberals one thing, but the liberals' definition of being liberal is not what the conservatives' definition is, and vice versa. So it's like we're fighting over labels, which don't exist. And the definition of those labels we're fighting over, we don't agree on. So yeah, it's like just totally insane. You never get to reality through this approach, right?
Yeah, we talked about this actually in the episode before this one about masculine and feminine energies, and how the masculine is that energy of looking at this versus this and putting it in boxes and separation so that we can understand things on a more clear level. And it does have the labels, and it can be really helpful to have labels. Like I know for myself, when I buy something, I love the label and see what's inside. I always read the label. I always read the small print too from the label to really know what it is that I'm buying, what it is. But ultimately, it's not necessarily its truth, because the label can be fake, and it doesn't necessarily have to say the right thing. But it's this, and then the feminine approach is realizing, okay, cool. So we're transcending the verses and be more like, let's be on that spectrum, on that dance with each other, and realizing, okay, we are polarity, like conservatives and liberals work together. They're meant to work together.
And they both need each other.
Yes, exactly. They both need each other. Like what is it? The wings of the same bird.
Right.
And if one is not working, the bird's not going to fly.
Right. Perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is why, go ahead.
I was just going to say I loved that whole piece, and I really kind of wanted to touch on it because when I first learned the difference between archetypes and stereotypes, it was like one of the big light bulb moments. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, that totally helps me reframe a lot of the ways that I think about a lot of things. So for any listeners, and I just read this in the intro of the podcast episode that launched this morning, but for any listeners out there right now who might be hearing us talk about archetypes, and maybe you haven't listened to past episodes, or you're hearing us talk about these stereotypes and you don't really have the awareness over what the difference is between the two, this guidebook from the Archetypes Oracle by Kim Krans totally changed my life. And I really want to take this opportunity just to read. I feel like no one says it better than her on the difference between archetypes and stereotypes. So it says, archetypes live in a big, beautiful cosmos swirling with potential, and stereotypes live in a small box with a tight lid. Let's imagine that we pass someone on the street. When we stereotype, we reduce them. We make assumptions, limit, judge, assess, decide. We misunderstand their complexity. We think that we know their story. Most devastatingly, we deem ourselves as separate. No need to listen, no need to learn. This is done unconsciously out of fear. With stereotypes comes the pain of contraction. If, however, we relate to this person archetypally, we become curious. We see coexisting potentials within them. We see their struggle and their shine. We realize that they are unknowable and multi-layered. We begin to relate, reveal, heal, connect. We see ourselves in them and them in us. All this can happen within a split second without their knowing. With archetypes comes the freedom of expansion. Everything belongs.
Gorgeously said.
Is it not?
Yeah, that was perfect.
Yeah, I really love that. And I was going to ask you as well, like for anyone who's listening to this and saying like, wow, this is really hitting something inside of me. Like, how do I start gaining awareness over different pieces of my own ego identity? What would you say first off? And also just starting to gain awareness was one of the biggest pinnacles in my own life, and starting to take notice of what those triggers and stereotypes are. What do you think that you know a lot about and that you deem as a lesser thing?
Right. So your first question is, how do you make that leap?
Yeah, well, how would you, if someone came to you and said like, oh my gosh, I just listened to that Sacred Sister podcast episode, how do I begin to assess the self more and see the self more clearly in terms of ego?
Okay. Well, first place to start always is to forget everything you think you know. Like become a child all over again. Start from scratch, and start from scratch with a different disposition of now I'm going to re-know it all, because you'll just get into another mess, right? But let reality tell me what it is. And you do that simply by never holding too strongly to your definitions of anything, because as Hannah said, labels are useful as pointers. They point us to reality, but it's like an address is not the home. You don't buy an address, you buy a home, and you can't experience an address, right? You can only experience a house. So the mind gets into trouble when it's trying to experience the address. It can't do it. You could never experience a label. So you can use a label as a helpful pointer. And once you are pointed to the reality, then let the label go and let the experience show you what it is. Listen with your intuition and not with your intellect. And in doing that, you just find there's this open-hearted compassion for everything and everyone, because you realize it's just a different experience from different reference points. If I was them living their life, I'd been through what they'd been through, I would think and believe everything they believe. That makes sense. So nobody's actually wrong about anything. We're just looking through limited points of view. And so, in a sense, whatever you think is right from that point of view. If I really believe I am this body that was abused at 4 years old, that will feel real to me. And from the belief that I am this body, well, that's true. I can't get out of that trauma or belief from within it. I have to disregard it. I have to go beyond it and find a higher perspective to look at myself from, saying the body isn't what I am. What happens to the body doesn't have to affect my nature and my essence. It's just another experience. I give it all the meaning it has. All of a sudden, the experience hasn't been, I'm not denying it. It never happened. No, no, no. I can see it from a divine point of view, right? And this is how healing is like the gift you give to the world. Because when you heal yourself, you find compassion for yourself and a higher point of view of yourself. And naturally, it's extended to everyone. It becomes impossible to judge other people who are suffering from the same things you used to suffer from once you've healed it, which is why we say projection is perception. Like if I'm judging somebody else for something, oh, that idiot, blah, 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 that's in me still. I haven't healed that yet. That perception of myself is still alive in me, and I'm giving it to them. So when I give myself a healed, holistic perspective, I will naturally give that to the other as well. So healing always happens like that, from the inside out. And so start from scratch, forget who you think you are, what you think you know about life, about others, and just have an open-hearted curiosity to experience reality as it is. See, I don't want to mislabel reality anymore. I want reality to tell me what it is. And it will never tell you with more definitions, right? It will tell you with that intuitive experience it gives to you in the present moment, which just always creates more compassion and more connection.
So beautifully said. And that just reminded me of just recently, one of my clients, before we go into the astral travel, we're calling in the higher self, and we're calling in whoever wants to join us to support. And she called in her higher self, and which was this really beautiful wild woman standing in her full naked self and expressing herself freely. And then she also called in her inner child, and she said, wow, they're so similar. And I love how you were just saying, really forgetting everything that you've learned, because like when we come here as children, that's where children are such divine teachers. When we come here, we're born into this world, we're still so close to source, and we understand the world on a deeper level, actually.
Right.
Because we haven't built up on that intellect as much and have received all these labels and all these education and whatever.
Right.
But rather just like, wow, I'm just pure awareness. I'm coming purely from source right now. And it's interesting how like our future self, of like our higher self in regards to like what we are becoming, what we are at the same time, because there's no time and space, but we are also becoming in this lifetime, is actually going back to remembering who we are, who we were in the first place, so.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's indescribably beautiful. The more you understand it, the less and less you're even able to really justify it with words, because the whole process is so imaginative from Source's perspective, which is why like widening your perspective of life, getting out of, I'm just this little person, that's what creates depression, because it's such a narrow funnel to look at reality through. And the more you widen it and you see the incredible, like indescribable complexity of reality and the connection of how everything is working together, it's just too marvelous for words. And like, that's where you want to live, is in that mystery.
And then in astrology, to go back to that, our personal identity, the sun, is what we're becoming in this lifetime, but it's also our inner child. It's also the most playful part within ourselves, the most where it's like, this is what brings us joy. This is what's effortless. This is how we play, how we create in this world. And so like going back to, okay, how can I truly express myself in this lifetime is to feel into what did I just effortlessly love to do when I was a kid, and how can I bring similar archetypal energies, doesn't have to be the exact same thing like building sandcastles, but like how can I bring that building aspect into my life now? And maybe be building houses or building homes now, like creating it into something that it's like, okay, I take that energy that comes naturally to me. And I love how you said that in the beginning, how just allowing the things that come effortlessly to you be who you are, and that is the sun, how we're shining our light. And it's not something that we have to force to happen, but rather just allowing the light to shine through us.
Yeah. Well said.
So well said. Oh.
Such a beautiful episode. Thank you. May this inspire every listener to just really dive deeper into questioning one's reality, and then therefore realizing, wow, who am I? Who is aware?
Yeah. Covered a lot of ground in this conversation. That's been really cool to kind of look at this one question or central theme from so many different angles. Really enjoyed it. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. And before we're gonna end the interview, we have 3 sacred questions that we ask each of our clients, and each of our guests, and you can just answer them in a shorter format.
I'll be a client.
Yeah.
No, sounds good. I'm excited.
Oh, okay. What does sacred mean to you?
Pure.
Beautiful. And who is a sacred sister or brother to you, and what does it mean to have one?
Phenomenal question. I would reflect to my definition of what is sacred. Somebody who's sacred in your life is a pure relationship where it's based on mutual love and appreciation for that shared being. Whereas a lot of relationships can be like, we're friends because you make me feel cool. I feel better around you. You give me all these things, this and that. And I would say that that's not a pure relationship because you're kind of in it for you. So yeah, to me, a sacred brother or sister is anybody who you can share a pure relationship with in that sense.
Beautiful. And how do you make something normal and mundane into something magical and sacred?
I love these questions. This has been something I've done a lot of work on in my own spiritual practice, of seeing where my ego has contaminated things with personal interest, even your love life, friends, relationships with your family. You can take the purity out of it when you make it all about you. And so even in what I do day to day, if I find myself getting stressed out or something, I'll question myself of like, why am I stressed right now? Like, this is a privilege. This is a joy, a gift to be able to do this. I've sort of like lost sight of the purity in it. And so whenever I direct my attention back to that original essence of like, this is my highest joy to do this, and that's the reason I do it, not for recognition, for success, or anything else, just go back to that core truth of why I began this, because it makes me come alive. Like, that's how you make it pure or sacred.
So beautiful. And for anybody who wants to start working with you and learn more about you and what you're doing, take classes with you, what do you offer?
I have 2 programs right now. One is an 8-week masterclass that's really about kind of the stuff we were talking about today. It's called Master Your Mind, helping you gain real self-mastery over your mind and self-awareness. And it's an 8-week course that takes you through, modules, lectures, practices, worksheets, and just all about integration. And then the other one I have is a year-long course based around A Course in Miracles. It's called Living the Course. And every day we do one of the daily lessons in the morning. So A Course in Miracles has 365 daily lessons. And so we go live, a co-teacher and myself go live with our group. We have about like 250 people. And we go live, do the lesson, give the practices. And then on Thursday nights, we have an hour-long masterclass. And anybody can join in those as well. But the year-long program, we just starts at the beginning of every year. So if that's something you're interested in, especially if A Course in Miracles is a text you've wanted to get into, but it's a little bit dense or something, that's kind of what this program is made for. So those are my two programs. And then just outside of that, my YouTube channel.
Wow, that's awesome. How cool. So do you get on and do the videos with the Course in Miracles every day?
Yep, 7 a.m. every day.
Wow.
365.
That is really, really cool. I really want to check that out. And I'm also curious, just being that A Course in Miracles is a great text for you. Were you very excited whenever Marianne Williamson was running for president during this last election cycle?
Yeah, that was really cool. I knew she never had a chance because she's not a career politician.
Yeah.
But it was just cool to see somebody like her in that space.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully we'll start to see a lot more of that as time goes on.
Absolutely. Wow, Erin, this has been such an illuminating, invigorating, inspiring episode for everyone that is here tuning in with us now until the end of the episode. We hope that if it was resonant for you, which I'm guessing it was because you're still here, we hope that you will go and connect with Erin in a way that feels resonant for you. And other than this, Hannah and I will hop onto our Patreon where we're going to share more personal experiences and stories on the topic of this episode. So hop over to Patreon and join us there. And otherwise, we are very, very excited to see you for the next episode.
Yeah, thank you guys again for having me. It's been a blast, and I've really enjoyed the conversation as well. So can't wait to do it again.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Namaste.